if the Wright brothers hadn't made the first flight, where would we be? We've only been flying 100 years, and you have to have people that have gone before you and done things to aspire to.
The learning from the past is incredibly important. It drives our future.
The mission of the National Aviation Hall of Fame is to remember our history, but it's also to inspire the next generation.
Is that I cannot remember a time that I was not totally fascinated with aviation. And I considered that one of the greatest honors of my life, to have my name in the Aviation Hall of Fame.
We must honor our heroes so we can learn from them, so we can thrive from them, and we can grow from them.
It will inspire younger people, but it also will inspire older people as well.
Minus 10, 9, 8. We have a go for main engine start. We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the returning Enshrinees of the National Aviation Hall of Fame. Charles F. Bolden, Eileen Collins, Robert Crippen, Ronald Fogelman, Robert Hoot Gibson, John King, Martha King, Dale Clapmeyer, Clay Lacey, let's give them another round of applause. And now, please pause for a brief moment of silence to remembrance of those inductees who have passed since the last enshrinement ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, please rise for the presentation of colors by the Civil Air Patrol Color Guard Cadets, escorted with bagpipes by Del Brond. Please then remain standing for the national anthem performed by Felita LaRocque, former lead vocalist for the U.S. Air Force Band of Flight.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Robert Hoot Gibson to deliver tonight's invocation.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, and we ask for your blessing upon this evening. We thank you for guiding the footsteps and the flight paths of the shining stars of aerospace that we enshrine this night. We thank you as well for all the blessings that those of us present here tonight have enjoyed in our lives. We seek your continuing guidance and protection as we continue our journeys forward, both in this life and in the next. We ask all this in your name. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the chair of the board of the National Aviation Hall of Fame, Michael Quiello.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the birthplace of aviation. It's great to be back home here in Dayton, Ohio. We're thrilled to have you with us again to honor not just one, but two classes of the Hall of Fame inductees. We are joined by many dignitaries and industry leaders, and we are grateful to have all of you with us here tonight. Thank you very much to our presenting sponsor, MedAir, which was founded by class of 2020 Enshrinee Joan Sullivan Garrett. We are also grateful for the ongoing support of Cirrus Aircraft at this event, in our Heritage Hall, Education Center, and through our education programs. I would ask all of you to consider the mission of the Hall of Fame, honoring aerospace legends to inspire future leaders. We are here to pay homage to the rich heritage of aviation and to the future of aviation, those enshrinees yet to come. Our mission is to inspire the future of the most innovative and fastest growing industry in the world. Through education in the classroom and in our Heritage Hall and Education Center, we seek to ensure aviation's future workforce. So, if you're under 20 years old, would you please stand? Thank you for the round of applause for our future leaders. Thank you for all your support to our mission. Now please sit back and enjoy the 58th Annual National Aviation Hall of Fame Dinner and Ceremony.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage our Enshrinement Master of Ceremony, pilot, flight instructor, and CNN correspondent, Pete Muntean.
Good evening. It is a thrill to be with you tonight, a night to honor aviation's past, acknowledge its vibrant present, along with aviation's bright future. Tonight we're inducting 10 incredible people into this illustrious group. But before we begin, I must underscore something amazing that will happen tonight. Tonight, 4 women will be inducted into the National Aviation Hall of Fame. This is important to me because, like many of you, my parents gifted me a love of flying, especially important to me because my late mother, Nancy Lynn, born and raised here in Dayton, Ohio, taught me to fly. The theme of tonight is standing on the shoulders of giants. So in that vein, I must mention my broadcasting mentor, Miles O'Brien, who is here tonight. Miles is a previous MC of this event, along with some names you might recognize: Joe Foss, Joe Engle, John Wayne, John Travolta, and Harrison Ford. A-listers aside, tonight's inspiration is the mission. Some of my heroes are in this room, some of your heroes are in this room, I'm sure. So thank you for being here, and let's get started. Our first inductee is Willa Brown. This impactful aviation leader had many firsts. Perhaps one of the most impressive is not known by all that many. Willa Brown trained hundreds of Tuskegee airmen during World War II, and that is only part of her legacy. Presenting Willa for induction is educator, historian, and biographer, Dr. Crystal Reynolds.
Can you guys hear me? It'll be worth the wait. On March 25th, 2022, to a crowd of about 300 people, Terre Haute, Indiana, my hometown, celebrated one of its own. Prior to March 25th, very few people in Terre Haute, Indiana knew the name Willa Beatrice Brown or knew of her groundbreaking accomplishments. However, on this day, this hometown hero was recognized with a one-of-a-kind permanent display with accompanying artifacts at the Terre Haute Regional Airport. The display, entitled The Willa Brown Experience, had become a reality. Interestingly, but unfortunately, prior to October 20th, 2021, when this researcher brought Willa to the attention of the mayor of Terre Haute and the director of the Terre Haute Airport, she was unknown to them and to many others of all creeds in this small town in Indiana. But of course, small town Indiana knew about another great Terre Hautian who could also fly. I'll say that again. But of course, small town Indiana knew about another great Terre Hautian who could also fly. Do you know who that is? Well, it's Larry Bird. Terre Haute is the adopted hometown of Larry Bird. I like Larry Bird. But there was another great Terre Hautian, an Indiana State University alumnus, who could also fly. And it was vital that others knew her name and what she had accomplished. It became my mission to educate the Terre Haute community about the lady who could fly. Due to the efforts of several amazing people, The Willa Brown experience became a reality on March 25th, 2022, during Women's History Month. So now, when people from all over the world fly into the Terre Haute Regional Airport, the first face they see as they exit the plane is that of Willa Beatrice Brown, this amazing woman of color. And once they get closer to the exhibit, they read about her amazing life. They experience who she was, what she did to make this country live up to its fundamental tenet that all persons are created equal. It is at this display where they read about her early years as a student in the Terre Haute schools, her years at Indiana State Normal School, where they can learn about her becoming the first black woman in the United States to earn a private pilot's license, and a commercial pilot's license, and where they can read about her uncompromising lobbying efforts to make the Tuskegee Airmen a reality. And I'm going to say that again. And where they can read about her uncompromising lobbying efforts to make the Tuskegee Airmen a reality. Aunt Willa, as I have been asked by the family to call her, is a hometown hero who now belongs to the world and belongs to the ages. Tonight, as we induct Aunt Willa into the National Aviation Hall of Fame, on behalf of Mayor Duke Bennett of the great city of Terre Haute, and behalf of my fellow Terre Hautians, I thank the National Aviation Hall of Fame Selection Committee and all who made this day possible. Her honor on March 25th and her honor tonight, September 24, 2022, were long overdue, but well worth the wait. It is tremendously important that we highlight forgotten yet influential heroes of yesterday, like Willa Brown. Merci beaucoup. I end in French because Aunt Willa was very fond of the French language and spoke it fluently. Her niece Joy enjoys telling the story of how Aunt Willa would send French language tapes to them for Christmas and send them for birthdays instead of the usual dolls or trains. Aunt Willa, the visionary, saw the bigger picture, and we are all better because of it. Bonsoir.
Tonight, we welcome lobbyist, teacher, and pilot Willa B. Brown Chappelle to the National Aviation Hall of Fame. Accepting her induction this evening is David Brown, Willa Brown's nephew.
Well, first, card one. First, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who had their hand in making this event happen. On behalf of the Brown family, we're extremely proud and pleased. As I listened to Dr. Reynolds' remarks, all I can think of is, wow, Aunt Willa was a remarkable person. Because I called her Aunt Willa, so did my friends and so did my family. She was my father's sister, and growing up, it wasn't appropriate for a child to call an adult by their first name. So we put a title on her name, and she became Aunt Willa. And that's what she's known by. In fact, when I hear Mr. Brown, I look around because I think they're looking for my dad and not me. I spent a few weekends growing up with her. Saturdays were the best. I can remember watching all the cartoons I wanted to all day, but Saturday night was the worst, only because it was going to be Lawrence Welk, Hee Haw, and the Jackie Gleason Show, and there was only one TV, so I was stuck with watching it then. In college, she became the coolest of cool. I stayed broke like most college students are, but I could always call Aunt Willa collect and say, I need help. And a note to young people, before there was Cash App, Zelle, or GoFundMe, there was Western Union. And she would say, don't worry, don't tell your dad I'm doing this. And I would say, no problem, because he got another phone call as well. And I would go down Highway 35 to Xenia, and I was eating at McDonald's for the rest of the week, thanks to Aunt Willa. I went to Central State University, that's where that comes into play. And I have to say, this is a remarkable experience. If I had known about, and the museum was here when I was in school, this would have been a great, inexpensive date evening to take somebody to. So I will have to come back, that's for sure. I will have never mentioned her aviation career, but if you asked about it, she would talk about it. And as long as you didn't ask for to record it, you were okay. She fought racism, that was a given, but you have to remember she fought sexism as well, because here's a lady running the show, but the men were in the forefront. I didn't get the flying bug, but I did work for Delta Airlines for 42 years before I retired as a ticket agent in August of 2020. Her goal was to see anybody who wanted to fly to learn how and present them with the opportunity. I feel Aunt Willa is with us today, and we both want to again say thank you very much. Thank you.
When we talk about standing on the shoulders of giants, you have to think big. And our next inductee was soft-spoken and humble, but her impact on the world of aviation was way bigger. Presenting tonight, a powerhouse who was inspired to make a similar mark on history, Shasta Ways captured the hearts of the world when she followed the path of her hero, Jerry Mock, and flew around the world at the age of 20 in a single-engine Bonanza. Ladies and gentlemen, Shasta Ways.
It is the 1960s. A housewife by the name of Geraldine Jerry Mock is standing in her kitchen stove, cooking dinner in her hometown in Ohio. Her 3 kids and husband gather around the dining table waiting for their meal. As Jerry starts serving her family, she turns to her husband. "If I don't get out of this house, I'm going to go nuts." "Why don't you just get into your plane and fly around the world?" her husband said. "All right," she replied, "I will." On April 17, 1964, after 29 days and 23,000 nautical miles, Jerry returned to her home airport in Columbus, Ohio, as the first woman to fly solo around the world in a single-engine aircraft. She did it. And not only did she set a historical world record, but she also did it in a dress and heels. That just made this whole record even more impressive. It was truly serendipity for me to have met Jerry when I decided to fly solo around the world. It was 2015. I was a struggling college student who sold my favorite red jacket for $50 to my sister, who got such a good deal, by the way, so that I had enough money for gas to get me from Daytona Beach, Florida to Quincy, Florida, and meet Jerry. You see, Jerry and I had 2 things in common. Number 1, our passion for flying. Number 2, Jerry grew up during the Great Depression, when the expectation for women were marriage and family. Being a woman from Afghanistan, my 5 sisters and I had similar cultural expectations. I grew up thinking that the best thing that life could offer me was to get married at a young age and have a family. This changed, of course, when I discovered aviation. After I filled up my gas tank, I had enough money left over to buy Jerry flowers. And after a 7-hour drive, I pulled up into her driveway, anxious to meet Miss Jerry Mock. She welcomed me to her home, shared pictures from her journey, told me a handful of memorable stories, and most importantly, she looked me into my eyes and told me that she had no doubt that I would follow her footsteps and fly around the world. This shook me at my core. She believed in me. And in moments of doubt, which believe me, there were many, I reminded myself of that. Jerry's warmth, mentorship, and support inspired me to cheer on and truly embrace 19-year-old Zara Rutherford, who recently broke my record of becoming the youngest woman to fly solo around the world. This is how Jerry impacted the last 2 earth-rounding women. Jerry Mock was a housewife, a mother, wife, pilot, record setter, risk taker, sister, fundraiser, businesswoman, fashionista, and most of all, a role model. Someone who paved the way and empowered others, especially me, to follow. Jerry, welcome to the National Aviation Hall of Fame. You deserve this.
Tonight, we welcome aviation pioneer Geraldine Mock to the National Aviation Hall of Fame. Accepting her induction this evening is Susan Reed, Geraldine Mock's sister.
Thank you. I am so honored to be here this evening to accept this award in my sister's name. And if I get a little emotional, think nothing of it. I really cared. It all began several years ago when Jerry was 7 years old. Our parents arranged for her to take a ride in a Ford tri-motor airplane. 7 years old, she announced when the plane landed, "I'm going to be a pilot when I grow up, and I'm going to fly around the world." She said, Daddy just patted her on the head and said, "That's nice, dear." She told her friends she was going to be a pilot and fly around the world. When she studied all about those wonderful countries all over the world, she thought, I need to see those. I need to see the pyramids. I need to ride a camel. Her friends laughed because this was a dream. But our parents taught us that we should follow our dreams, and that if we really wanted to do something, we could make it happen. It would not have been possible back in 1964 to fly a little single-engine Cessna around the world without a lot of help, without a lot of people having something to do with it. Although Jerry did most of the planning herself, General Lassiter from Lockwood Air Base had some helpful ideas for her. There are so many people to thank, so many people who made this dream come true. I could not possibly name them all tonight, and I'm sure you're glad I won't try. We, her family, never doubted. Russ, her husband, a pilot, he was very strong for her. All of the family, we banded together. We knew without a doubt that she was going to make it. She had a very strong faith. We had faith in her and God, and she often referred to God as her co-pilot. If she were here today, I think she would refer to the words in the dedication that she wrote in her book, 3-8 Charlie. To those who pioneered the way and those who gave their lives to find it. To those who designed and built the airplane and the equipment that made the flight possible. To those who wrote checks and those who encouraged and waited patiently at home. Jerry was very grateful to Wendy Hollander and Dale Ratliff, who recreated and published the new edition of her book. They also arranged for a plane exactly like hers to be on display in Newark, Ohio at our local museum. She and Dale had so much to do with this. I know that Jerry, if she were here, would be thanking. She also would be thanking Nancy Rowe Pym. Nancy wrote a wonderful book about Jerry, and through her contacts was able to successfully sponsor Jerry. I, too, am so grateful to these wonderful women. I just wish Jerry could be here tonight. Thank you.
What is so cool about Jerry Mock's legacy is that her Cessna 180 will be in the We All Fly Gallery in the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum that opens on October 14th for all the world to see forever. Pretty incredible. Okay, everybody has somebody they admire and look up to, but somebody has to be the first. It's important to remember that at the dawn of powered flight in 1903, the world was a very different place. Simply put, the freedoms we enjoy today were not afforded to everybody. Pioneers like Bessie Coleman, who in 1921 was the first female, African-American, and Native American to earn a pilot's license, paved the way for those to come. But Bessie still had to go to France to earn her license. Black pilots could not earn a pilot's license in the US. Eugene Bullard also wanted to fly, but he too had to look to Europe to fulfill his dreams. Before and after earning his license in France, Eugene served with distinction in that country, and his legacy is so well regarded by the French that they sent a representative to share in this moment. Thank you, Colonel David Paplardo, who is at table 24. David, can you please stand? Thank you, David. He is the Air and Space Attaché at the French Embassy in Washington, D.C. This induction is long overdue. To present Eugene Bullard for enshrinement, please welcome Harriet Bullard White.
Eugene Bullard was born in 1895 in Columbus, Georgia. This was during a period of post-Reconstruction, a time when Jim Crow laws were enforced in Georgia, which started in 1880. His father, William Octave Bullard, was born into slavery. There were 10 children born to his dad and mom, Josephine Bullard. I've often asked myself over the years, when thinking of Eugene, what are the mental and instinctive qualities of a child born during Eugene's era? A child that would grow to have such an amazing, incredible story that spans 2 continents, governments, languages in which he would become fluent. Eugene once took a serious tanning from my grandfather. Eugene had been attacked and beaten really badly. And when my grandfather demanded Eugene tell him who did this to him, Eugene refused and continued to refuse to tell even after my granddad actually tried to spank it out of him. Eugene was around 11 years old when this happened. He refused to tell because he was afraid they would kill my grandfather if he confronted them. There's so many stories, incredible stories, about his triumphs as a child and as a young man growing up alone in Europe. I hope one day his full story will be told at home. Eugene was a person who, as a child and as an adult, had incredible hope, perseverance, determination, and courage. A kind of courage, hope, and self-determination that surpasses all understanding. His self-worth clearly protected by God. He would become a grandfather, a great father of two beautiful daughters, a phenomenal role model to his family, which will never die. Eugene not only dreamed of France as a child, but worked his way across the ocean to Europe, then across Scotland, across England, and eventually made his way to his beloved France, and his dream of being treated fairly. There he became a war hero and a successful business owner before and after the war. And tonight, on behalf of the Bullard family, I would like to extend our gratitude to the nation of France, who allowed him to shine, becoming the first African-American fighter pilot with all the distinguished French military awards and medals, including the French Legion of Honor presented by President Charles de Gaulle in 1959. The Bullard family also extends gratitude to former President Clinton, who in 1994, 33 years after his death, commissioned Eugene, second lieutenant in the United States Air Force. Eugene had two daughters, Jacqueline and Lolita, both born in France and reared by their father, Eugene, here in the States. Both have since passed away. But you should know that the men in Eugene's immediate family were U.S. military men. Eugene's grandson, retired Air Force Master Sergeant Richard Reed, who is here with us tonight, and a great-grandson, Dr. Keith Edward Reed, who served his country in the U.S. Navy. Eugene's story is both heroic and somewhat tragic. Major General Patrick Donahoe at Fort Benning once called him America's loss, and that it's up to us to make sure his story is told. And here we are, telling his story alongside the Wright brothers, Neil Armstrong, and America's greats. Winston Churchill once famously observed, and I'm paraphrasing, "Americans will always, in the end, do the right thing." And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what we do tonight. Thank you, National Aviation Hall of Fame. Amy, who has been with our family since 2019, Megan, Kelly, and all those who have been excellent partners. And now, without further ado, it is with great joy that I would like to join with my family and present Eugene Bullard for induction into the National Aviation Hall of Fame. Thank you.
Tonight, we welcome Pathfinder and aviator Eugene Jacques Bullard to the National Aviation Hall of Fame. Accepting his induction this evening is Richard Reed, grandson of the late Eugene Bullard.
Thank you. I am very pleased and honored to represent not only myself, but the other Bullard relatives that are here present today as we celebrate the induction of Eugene Jacques Bullard into the Aviation Hall of Fame. My grandfather's accomplishment as the first black combat aviator, while very noteworthy, was just one of several events that shaped his life. Foremost was leaving his home in Georgia at the age of 11 to make his way for France in search of freedom. Secondly was fighting in World War I and getting wounded in the Battle of Verdun. Thirdly was a wager of $2,000 bet that he made with a friend that he could become an aviator, when his friend asked him, what would you do if you couldn't fight as a soldier any longer in the French Foreign Legion? And then achieving his pilot license in May of 1917 and winning that bet. While I was fortunate to have spent time with my grandfather as a child, I had no idea of the extent of his accomplishments until I was a teenager. To me, my grandfather's life exemplifies what you can accomplish if you have a dream, tenacity, determination, and perseverance to pursue that dream. The Bullitt family and I are proud to have Eugene inducted into the National Aviation Hall of Fame, and thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome National Aviation Hall of Fame President and CEO, Amy Spowert.
Right? I hope everyone's enjoying their dinner. There's Mark Armstrong. I've been looking for you. Hey, Mark. Yay. I want to start by taking a moment. In the right back corner are our volunteers. I'd like to ask the volunteers of the National Aviation Hall of Fame to please stand and be recognized. In 2019, pre-COVID, we had 26 volunteers. We have 13 now. So between death and not coming back because of COVID, our force is small but mighty. I'd also like to thank the staff. I'd like to thank Megan, Diane, Patrick. I'd like to thank Amy, and I'd like to thank Greg Schell from PBS. We've been through a lot together, so I'd like to thank the staff to please stand and be recognized. It's hard to describe how wonderful it is to be here with you all tonight. Standing here in front of you, it seems like a lifetime ago that we closed the Hall of Fame and canceled enshrinement due to the global pandemic. We missed you. I missed you. Our annual enshrinement celebration honors the individuals responsible for the most bold, courageous, and ingenious achievements in aviation so that the next generation will know of them and be inspired by them. This is why the National Aviation Hall of Fame exists. I want you to know that during the quiet days of the pandemic, we at the Hall of Fame got busy disrupting the airspace. We looked at the data, we identified the gaps, and we developed a program to address learning loss due to COVID and to inspire the future aviation workforce. Discovering flight with the National Aviation Hall of Fame is a game changer. It's made up of 3 distinct parts, including the nation's only elementary age aviation-based, STEAM-led multidisciplinary curriculum. Created in partnership with PBS, it unites the educational expertise of the most trusted name in early childhood education with the National Aviation Hall of Fame's legacy in aviation and aerospace. Discovering Flight also includes the Junior Collier Award, targeted towards students in grades 3 through 5 and 6 through 8. This award was created with our partners at the National Aeronautic Association and the National Air and Space Museum to challenge students to create projects inspired by that year's Collier Award winner. And last but not least, Discovering Flight includes Why I Fly videos. These short films are created in partnership with Emmy award-winning aviation filmmakers Adam and Carol White of Hemlock Films. These short films highlight diverse people in the breadth of careers in aviation. I was recently invited to share Discovering Flight with one of the biggest cargo carriers in the world. After a very short time, it was clear that they were not interested. Her incredulous response was, "That's too far away. We need pilots now." I told them what I'm telling you now. We must start the aviation career pipeline long before high school or college. Young people, especially girls and minorities, lose confidence in their abilities before they even arrive high school. And if we miss them, where will the dreamers come from? The mechanics, the airport directors, the Bessie Colemans, the Dick Gordons, the Max Fagets. If you had it within your power to change the future of our industry, why wouldn't you? What will it do to aviation if we miss the future Dale Clapmeyers and the Joe Clarks? Where will aviation go without the Jackie Cochrans yet to come? Imagine if every Willa Brown could climb without barriers. If all children whose dream it is to soar were ignited and nurtured. Imagine with me where our industry could go. I want to thank Joe Zeese, Governor DeWine's aviation advisor, who took the Ohio Department of Education, who took a giant leap with us. Because of their, listen to this, because of their support, 100,000 Ohio school children will receive dedicated, exciting exposure to aviation inside their classrooms and inside the National Aviation Hall of Fame. And thank you. Thanks, Joe. And we're not stopping there. With the support of Cirrus and Gulfstream, children in Duluth, Grand Forks, Savannah, and Knoxville will know that aviation is not out of reach for them. People think I'm joking when I say at the Hall of Fame we want to change the world. But when our role models are disruptors themselves, people like Joan Sullivan Garrett, Paul Kaminsky, Story Musgrave, and all of you here with us tonight, why wouldn't we reach for the stars? We are honoring these 10 aerospace legends here tonight, and we invite you to come with us and inspire future leaders. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage Pete Muntean.
Isn't Amy awesome? You know, she's not a pilot, and she has so much passion for aviation. We know that it takes commitment and drive and determination to be involved in this. She is incredible. One more round of applause for Amy Spillard, please. Thank you. Okay, we're shifting gears now to space. If you're like me, you're probably fascinated by the images coming out of the James Webb Space Telescope. It might make you feel a bit small, but the impact of our next inductee was anything but. Because of the genius of Max Faget, astronauts were able to do many things, including both launch and return safely to Earth. To present Dr. Faget is someone who endeavored to see the universe as a scientist astronaut and had a tremendous impact on the technicalities of the space program. Please welcome Dr. Joe Allen.
Good evening. First, I want to give special thanks to the Faget family for giving me the opportunity to talk about Max for 2 minutes. I am truly honored. Second, I must give additional thanks to Amy and the team at the Aviation Hall of Fame for such a marvelous celebration. Third, we need to recognize the commitments that the leaders of America made to go into space. After Sputnik, John Kennedy asked James Webb what we needed to do to beat the Russians in space. James Webb said that we would have to send a man to the moon and bring him back safely. John Kennedy then asked, "How much will this cost?" And how long will it take? And Mr. said, I will have to ask my boys. And one of his boys was Max Faget. Max told Mr. Webb that it would take 20 years and would cost $10 billion. Mr. Webb flipped the numbers, and he said, Mr. President, it will take 10 years, and it will cost $20 billion. In actual fact, it took 9.5 years, and it cost just under $20 billion. As a background, I bet that most of you did not know that Max was a submariner during World War II. After the war, he left the submarine team and became an inventor and a designer. Max designed the Mercury, Gemini spaceships, which flew around the Earth at 18,000 miles an hour. Then he designed the Apollo spaceship to go to the moon. He designed the command and the lunar modules. And the command module had to be able to re-enter the atmosphere at 24,000 miles an hour. He designed it like an upside-down gumdrop with a heat shield on the base as opposed to a streamlined re-entry airplane-like design. The module would come into the atmosphere with the bottom down, so the heat shield would burn away as the vehicle decelerated through our upper atmosphere. I was in mission control when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon. Max and Wernher von Braun were sitting right in front of me, looking right out at the flight controller's consoles. We're looking out at, and Neil called to Mission Control and said, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Werner then leaned over to Max and said, Max, you were correct. You always said this was a good idea. Faget, von Braun, and Webb were geniuses. Now, we all became old and gray, but it didn't matter none. Max was always acting like a kid. You see, Max did not know he could not fly, and so he did. I'm so happy to present my friend Max Faget for the enshrinement into the National Aviation Hall of Fame. Thank you.
Tonight, we welcome engineer and innovator Maxime Faget to the National Aviation Hall of Fame, presented by Hall of Fame President David Brixey. Accepting his induction this evening is Anne Faget, daughter of the late Maxime Faget.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Joe, for that wonderful tribute. My name is Anne Faget, and I'm here tonight with my siblings, Carol, Guy, and Nanette Faget. Guy is wearing our dad's tuxedo, and my sisters and I are wearing some of our mother's jewelry. So we know that our parents are here tonight with us in spirit. Our dad would be tickled pink to be standing here tonight alongside the other Enshrinees, joining all who have contributed to our nation's rich aviation history. Max Faget was not only a brilliant aerospace engineer, he was also a devoted husband and father. In addition to his numerous original designs that advanced the fields of aeronautics and space, he displayed creativity in other areas. He designed the house in Dickinson, where we all grew up, and also helped design Carol's house in Austin. We have so many fond memories of the times he spent with us while we were growing up. He taught us all to water ski. He even created a little chair on skis so that he could slowly tow Nanette while she was still a toddler. He enjoyed spending evenings after work making improvements to his windmill-class sailboat, and we all took our turn crewing for him for the races on Clear Lake, where he was quite the competitive sailor. He was also quite the competitive racquetball player. Just ask Charlie Bolden. He loved making things and tinkering in the garage. He created expert inlaid cabinets for our family room and made all the furniture for Guy's bedroom in our Dickinson home. Later, he made a bookcase for my first apartment, which I still own today. Some things did not go as planned, like the time he caught the garage on fire painting our VW Beetle. Of course, the most important project to emerge from his garage workshop was the first model of the space shuttle with straight wings that he made out of balsa wood and which is now on display at the Kennedy Space Center. Recently, the state of Texas designated the Max Faget Home and Workshop as a historical landmark where the initial space shuttle concept was conceived and born. The point is that while he was making aerospace history, to us, he was just Daddy. And we'd be remiss if we did not mention our mother, Nancy, his biggest and proudest supporter. And so the four of us are pleased and proud to accept this honor on his behalf as he takes his richly deserved place in the National Aviation Hall of Fame. I would like to end with a quote from our father that sums up his career. "I never considered what I did as work. When I was a boy, I enjoyed playing with toys. And when I got older, my toys just got bigger." Thank you.
Okay, it's always an exciting moment at the Hall of Fame when a nomination for induction is made by an enshrinee, like when Hoot Gibson nominated Charlie Bolden. Our next inductee was nominated by enshrinee Bill Anders, who was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2004. To make Dick Gordon's induction even more exciting, another aerospace legend, who is also a nominee for induction into the Hall of Fame, will present Dick Gordon for induction. Dr. Harrison Schmitt is a scientist astronaut who is the most recent person alive today to have walked on the moon. We are excited to welcome him tonight to present his friend Dick Gordon for induction into the National Aviation Hall of Fame.
Good evening. Captain Richard Francis Gordon, Jr., served his country with dedication and expertise for 22 years as a Navy fighter pilot, a test pilot, Gemini, and Apollo astronaut. Dick Gordon filled these roles competently, imaginatively, and, I should add, enthusiastically for those of you who knew him well. Dick flew as pilot on the 44-orbit Gemini 11 mission in September of 1966 with his old friend Pete Conrad, friend and colleague, I might say, and as command pilot. He was awarded a Gold Star on his previously received Distinguished Flying Cross with the following citation: "For heroism and extraordinary achievement, while serving as pilot, Gordon completed a space flight of 71 hours and 16 minutes. A rendezvous on the first revolution, docking with the previously launched Agena rocket, 2 periods of extravehicular activity involved attaching a tether to the Agena, an exercise in the dynamics of 2 spacecraft linked together by a 100-foot strap, and to complete everything, a fully automated re-entry. In November 1969, as command module pilot on the all-Navy Apollo 12 mission with Pete Conrad and Alan Bean. I can say something about the Navy because I did fly their helicopters. Okay. Dick expertly assisted Mission Control in the successful recovery of spacecraft systems after their Saturn V and spacecraft were struck by lightning during launch. How many of you saw that? That was something, wasn't it? Woo. As planned, though, for Apollo 12's primary objective, Conrad and Bean landed within 180 meters of the Surveyor 3 robotics lander that reached the moon's Mare Cognitum over 2 years previously. Dick's absolutely essential role, and I emphasize essential, in that landing consisted of tying the path of the Apollo 12 orbit to the Surveyor's position on the lunar surface. This he did using the command module sextant to track small surface features, particularly craters, of known position relative to the moon's center of mass, all of which had been determined by the orbiter spacecraft imagery and orbital dynamics. I know how difficult this landmark tracking procedure was, having worked with Jim Lovell to develop it for tests on the Apollo 8 mission, which were conducted successfully. In repeating the success of the Apollo 11 landing, Gordon, Conrad, and Bean of the Apollo 12 made it clear in the Cold War context that the United States was vastly more capable than any other society in technology and space exploration. Once it was announced that Dick's likely prime commander mission, Apollo 18, had been canceled, he continued to put all his energies into the success of Apollo 15, for which he was backup commander. As Dick's lunar module pilot and field geologist on the backup crew of Apollo 15, I was continually amazed at how quickly he mastered the basic principles of what we call field geology, building on his scientific education in chemistry and, of course, his acute observational experience in aircraft tests at Pax River. On the lighter side, Dick Gordon was, I believe, the only Apollo astronaut with professional baseball experience. His record of throwing unhittable curves and what he called sliders during Gemini and Apollo pickup games against mission support personnel gave him a larger-than-life reputation within the astronaut office, and I think within other offices. He even pitched 9 innings in Dodger Stadium in 1971, when Apollo 15's prime backup and support crews answered the challenge from the North American engineers for a game. We won't discuss the results of that game. As a practical joker, Dick was never a person to let a dead snake go to waste. He retrieved a rattlesnake we found on our running track outside the crew quarters in Florida and, clandestinely, coiled it under another astronaut's office desk with consequences we can chat about later. Now, it is my great privilege and honor to present Captain Richard Gordon upon his enshrinement into the National Aviation Hall of Fame.
Tonight, we welcome business executive, aviator, and astronaut Richard Gordon to the National Aviation Hall of Fame. Accepting his induction this evening is Larry Gordon, son of the late Richard Gordon.
What an honor to receive this award on behalf of my father. I'm very grateful to Dr. Schmidt and his wife Teresa for being here and for sharing a couple stories. While working with my father as they trained together as the backup of Apollo 15 and prime crew for Apollo 18 before Dr. Schmidt was assigned to Apollo 17. Dr. Schmidt's stories just scratched the surface. Without exception, every time I meet someone who knew my father, the reaction is invariably, "I loved your father," and usually followed by a hilarious personal story, some of which I could never say up here. I wish to, at this point, I want to acknowledge a few other family members. My wife, Nancy, for joining me on table 22. My big sister, Carlene, and her husband, JR, who came from outside Asheville, North Carolina, to be here. And my baby sister, Diane, and her husband, Bob, who journeyed from Fredericksburg, Virginia, to attend. My dad was selected to NASA in 1963 and retired from NASA in the Navy in 1972. I was 6 years old when we first moved to Houston and 14 when we left. I was a very impressionable young boy, as you might imagine, during that period. One thing that didn't impress me very much, though, were astronauts. So many of them and their families lived in the neighborhood where we lived in Houston. Jim McDivitt, Apollo 9, was our backdoor neighbor. Mike Collins, Apollo 11, lived one house down and across the street. Dave Scott, Apollo 15, lived about 2 houses down the street in the other direction. Buzz Aldrin, Apollo 11, lived maybe half a mile away, and his son Andy was a classmate in elementary school. Also down the street, Gene Cernan, who flew with Jack Schmitt on Apollo 17, and next to Gene, poignantly, lived Roger Chaffee, who died in the horrible Apollo 1 fire along with Gus Grissom and Ed White in 1967. In a sense, those two astronauts represented the alpha and the omega of the Apollo manned space program. What did impress me as a boy, and what set my father apart from the other astronauts, at least in my mind, was that he had won the Bendix Trophy in 1961, setting a transcontinental speed record in an F-4H Phantom II, eclipsing, among others, the speed record set by John Glenn 4 years earlier in 1957. I looked at that trophy when I was a boy almost every day. My father was a pilot's pilot and one of the very best. By the way, for some of you history buffs, aviation history buffs, the first Bendix race was won in 1931 by someone you may have heard of named Major Jimmy Doolittle. My father made the most of his God-given talents and inspired me to have my own career in the Navy. I jokingly say he went that direction. I studied the geoacoustic properties of the ocean bottom and went the other direction for anti-submarine warfare and underwater acoustics. So I want to thank Amy Spowert, her staff, and the Hall of Fame for this wonderful honor. I'm very proud to accept this on behalf of my father. My only wish was that he was still here to receive it himself. Thank you again.
Theme of tonight, standing on the shoulders of giants. And the next inductee is a supernova. He earned some of the first that will remain his for all time, some that will remain because they're so far out of consideration for even the most passionate aviators. Story Musgrave is the most formally educated astronaut with 6 different degrees. He's also the only person to have flown aboard all 5 space shuttles. And don't assume he stays in the aircraft all the time. Story has made over 500 parachute jumps. His nominator was the beloved matriarch of the National Aviation Hall of Fame, Zoe Dell Nutter, and we're so pleased that her legacy endures as her wishes come true. Here to present the next inductee is his son, Lane Musgrave.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First, I want to thank Amy and her team for such an incredible night at such a beautiful venue. My name's Lane. I'm proud to be a lieutenant flying the B-1 bomber in the world's greatest Air Force at Dyess Air Force Base. During his days at NASA, while I was still a toddler, a man collapsed at a training exercise, and Story cared for him before the ambulance arrived. And Being as young as I was, I asked him later, "Why'd they call for you, Dad? I thought you just flew rockets." And he replied, "I do, honey, but I'm also a doctor and a pilot." And I didn't really believe him. People would always ask me growing up, "Do you want to be like your dad?" And who wouldn't want to be an astronaut? But I'm not sure anyone will ever be like Story. Growing up in a dairy farm in western Massachusetts, he always had a special relationship with machines of all sizes. He was building his own rafts to float the Housatonic River at age 4. At 9 years old, he was fixing tractors in the field. By 13, he was soloing crop dusters. He was a Marine crew chief on an aircraft carrier for the Korean War at 18. Later, he was a neuroscientist, trauma surgeon, and a parachutist with hundreds of free falls. He often credits his success in aviation to those early experiences on the Linwood farm and long nights working in the emergency room at Denver General. But his most enduring trait, at least in my opinion, is the creativity that he brought to the flying endeavor and the way he animated aircraft as a living, breathing partner in flight. It wouldn't be a collection of aviators without a story, so here's the best one I know from him. He was in a T-38, tail number 924, at El Toro in Anaheim, taking off to the east, and a few seconds after pulling his gear up, he hears a huge explosion off the left side, and he sees his left engine roll all the way back. He quickly and accurately assessed it as a compressor stall, which can be a fatal mishap on takeoff roll. He brings the left engine back to idle and immediately pushes the right engine up into the afterburner because he needs a maximum amount of thrust to get away from the ground. And he gets a right engine firelight. So this is a big problem. No engine on the left, firelight on the right. ATC, as helpful as they are, jumps on the radio and says, "NASA 924, you are trailing smoke and fire, and pieces of your aircraft are falling to the ground. Advise your intentions." He calmly replies, "Yes, fire confirmed, returning 270 back to the north." A few seconds later, he's pushing the ignition switch on the left engine, trying to coax it back to life. And he miraculously gets it restarted. He pushes it up to mill power, brings the right engine back, thinking he has a good engine now. Boom, left engine firelight. So what does the boldface checklist say? You've got 2 engines on fire, you can't get them out, eject. But that's not what Story does. Instead, he kept his cool, glided back around back to the north, and landed. The commander and the fire brigade are already on the scene, trying to get his tail cold and aghast at the scene he has created. Keep in mind, he's 45 at this time, but the commander says, "Young man, do you have any idea what you've done?" And Story's looking around confused. He says, "Well, yes, sir," looking at this dripping jet. "You're looking at it." And he says, "Son, I'm not worried about the airplane." And they turn around, and El Toro is on fire. There's a ring of 24 fires that he set along his recovery to the airfield. Fortunately, there were no injuries or permanent damage. But the accident board investigation asked him, "You had a checklist, son. Why didn't you follow it?" Now, in the telling response, which is all you need to know about Story and his approach to flight, he says, "I had an emotional attachment to this machine. It was working hard to get me home, and I am not going to abandon it. I wasn't thinking about saving my butt or what I was going to eject over. I was thinking, I still have a flying machine. If it doesn't lose control, and if I can keep it flying, me and the machine are coming home." So as we celebrate all these legendary aviators here tonight in this house that Orville and Wilbur built, I couldn't be more proud to celebrate and honor my father. A farm kid who beat the odds, going from fixing tractors to saving the Hubble telescope. He's a pilot with over 18,000 hours in over 180 different aircraft and a veteran astronaut of 6 shuttle flights. So it's my honor to introduce my father, Dr. Story Musgrave.
Tonight, we welcome physician and astronaut Story Musgrave to the National Aviation Hall of Fame.
thanks so much, Lindsay. Yeah, talking to Mike. Thanks so much, Lindsay. And I need to thank the museum for putting a Douglas AD Skyraider there for me. Right there. So, I was an engine mechanic, a crew chief, and I flew in the right seat of that at the age of 18 with the Marines in Korea. That's one of my little sweeties right there. I love and adore you. So I got to say that because the airplane's sitting there. During Apollo, over 50 years ago, I interviewed with your archetypal journalist, Walter Cronkite, on Launch Pad A at the Kennedy Space Center. He inquired of me, story, what is this about? Where are we going? What are you doing? Where are you going? What does all this mean to you? Except for the numbers, the answers I gave to Walter over 50 years ago have not changed. We're here. First of all, I am extremely privileged and appreciative for all the extraordinary, spectacular adventures that I have experienced since soloing on a passenger at the age of 13 and the next 74 years of flying after that. My adventures include 19,000 hours of flying really exotic, beautiful, fascinating airplanes, and over 900 free-fall parachute jumps. 7 space missions, including as a backup crew member on the first Apollo Saturn 1B Skylab mission, and then on Challenger's first flight, first shuttle spacewalk, another one also on Challenger, and then on to every one of the shuttles. Secondly, Walter, is that the entire team on all of those endeavors, project managers, engineers, people like yourselves, FAA controllers, the mechanics. Lane had a tough story to tell you. Maintenance didn't do that problem. That was a systematic problem of a weld that I discovered, and we had to fix all the airplanes. I was a maintenance test pilot for NASA. For decades, I did 900 functional check flights. I never found a single maintenance error. I love and adore those people. All of those people. Yes. The entire team, launch controllers and the mission controllers, I love and adore. I was a capsule communicator and mission control for 25 missions. Maybe that was the most important thing that I did for NASA. They were incredible decisions. The team, all of those people, they kept Story Musgrave on course, safe and alive. And man, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your tender love and care and just for being you. And lastly, this journey, the journey we are on, the journey that all of you are on, the journey of human experience, exploration is continuing. And you here, more than any other place, are being sure that human experience, exploration, and the future happens. The most important part of this life that I have is my gang. It's my kids and their kids. And they're here to share this moment. You have met Lane, I'm incredibly proud of. He's in B-1s, as he said, at Dyess Air Force Base, and he's flying in general aviation. Other children were going to be here, but their mom, Patricia, that some of you remember and knew, she had a bad incident last week, a stroke, and so my kids stayed home to take care of us. But I also have a little story here. Little story. There is little story. Yes. And so I have to call It's Big and Little Story, Miles, because there's 2 of us and we got to differentiate. It could be story 1 or 2, but no. We're a little story and a little yes because we got 2 stories, but she's taller than her dad. She and a bunch of kids, elementary school on up, from EA Chapter 1240, helped us to build my current aircraft. Kids built my current aircraft. It's an open cockpit. It's like you're sitting on a board here. It's got twin Rotax motors up on the wings that are pushing. It's an amphibian. So it's got floats and it's got wheels. It's water. Now, Story, age 16, that little sweetie over there, she flies the air camp and she's in flying school with Aerostar and Kissimmee. Our most exciting adventures in this open cockpit airplane are to launch out of Florida to the Bahamas. And from the Bahamas, so we splash and dash and we ride the waves and we go down through Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, and all the way down on the Caribbean, that incredible blue water of the Caribbean islands. That's the adventure we are doing today. And yes, this journey for me and for all of you goes on. It continues. But especially with this extraordinary, joyful event here in Dayton, this historic town of the Wright brothers. My family and I thank you ever so much for this wonderful honor.
Possible Story has the world's youngest first solo, too. Is anyone younger than 13 who's done a first solo? Probably not legally, at least. We won't tell the FAA. Margaret Hamilton's impact on aerospace is a unique one. She touched the Apollo program in ways that enabled the success of the program and portions of Skylab. And her work at MIT's Draper Laboratory not only formalized the term software engineering by helping to perfect a trustworthy aerospace software design, but also earned her the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2016. Margaret and her daughter Lauren were unable to be with us here tonight, but they recorded these messages, so please turn your attention to the screens for fond memories from Lauren Hamilton.
Let me begin by saying it is an honor to be asked to present my mother, Margaret Hamilton, as an inductee to the National Aviation Hall of Fame of 2022. I hope a small bit of my personal reminiscences of her can give a glimpse of her specialness to the greater public. Although only 8 or 9 years old at the time my mother was working on the Apollo program, I do have some memories of her work environment and events of the time. Visiting my mother at work was always a surreal experience, like walking on the set of a science fiction movie. I could wander into the huge, dimly lit room full of giant, and I mean giant, computers that could converse with me via typing and printout. I remember the responses of the computer could be pretty sassy. Particularly annoying to my 8-year-old self, the computers could, in the parlance of those days, backtalk to me. I could slide down long white hallways filled with stacks of code, could hide under hundreds of metallic green desks, peek into empty offices. Rather than swinging on the monkey bars of the local city playground, I could find myself manning the controls of the mock Apollo command module down the hall from my mother's office. Admittedly, my very favorite thing about my mother's workplace was the soda machine at the end of the hall, a very tall machine with a vast array of delectables, including my 2 favorites, Fanta Grape and Fanta Orange. That one could access such delicacies by inserting a mere quarter into a slot was to me a technological miracle. Although I enjoyed these benefits of having a mother who headed up the software guidance for the Apollo moon landing, I had no sense of the enormity or profundity of her participation in this world-changing event. I later realized that she was working at the crossroads of 2 of the highest endeavors of humanity, that of flight and that of technological innovation. To fly into space, literally through the means of intellectual flight, or you might say imagination, that it takes to create software development, that was a union of the best elements of human enterprise. Little did I know then that my mom, who liked to shop for mini dresses at Marimekko, who loved the Beatles and the Doors, who thought Montgomery Clift was fine, happened to be a crucial part of human history with a super brain and a great intellectual courage, and could care less if anyone questioned her fitness for this role because she was a woman. I, of course, appreciate it all now. Because of the induction of my mother by the National Aviation Hall of Fame, I am able to express my admiration for her and to share with the public my pride in her accomplishments. And so here, without further ado, is my mother, Margaret Hamilton.
Please turn your attention to the screens for a message from National Aviation Hall of Fame, Class of 2022 inductee, Margaret Hamilton.
Thank you to the National Aviation Hall of Fame for this great honor and for giving me the opportunity to thank those who have helped me along the way. Whatever success I may have experienced, much of it was because I was in the right place at the right time, with the right opportunities and the right people. My early days were deep in the trenches. I began by developing software at MIT, first for the father of chaos theory, Professor Edward N. Lorenz. His enthusiasm for software was contagious. Then for the U.S. Air Force SAGE system for identifying incoming enemy aircraft. Although everyone was serious about his or her work, we all had so much fun working together as a team. This was only the beginning of what would come next, the Apollo onboard flight software effort at MIT under contract to NASA. The challenge, the software was man-rated, meaning astronauts' lives were at stake. It had to work the first time. Not only did it have to be ultra reliable, it would need to be able to detect an error and recover from it in real time. Problems had to be solved, never solved before. I began by building software for the unmanned missions. Manned missions were next. I was now in charge of the team that developed the onboard flight software for all the manned missions, not the least of which was Apollo 11. I asked, what if there was an emergency during flight and we wanted to warn the astronauts? I thought there had to be a way. There was. Apollo 11 was special. We had never gone to the moon before. Everything was going perfectly. All of a sudden, something totally unexpected happened. Just as the astronauts were about to land on the moon, the software's priority displays interrupted the astronauts' normal mission displays to warn them there was an emergency. The never supposed to happen alarms, in this case 1201 and 1202, reminded the astronauts to place the rendezvous radar switch back in the right position, giving them a go, no-go decision to land or not to land. The decision was a go for the landing. The Apollo 11 astronauts became the first humans to walk on the moon. Our software became the first software to run on the moon. The onboard flight software's man-in-the-loop error detection and recovery mechanisms had come to the rescue. This would not have been possible without the contributions made by the other groups to support us and making this a reality. The hardware people, the astronauts, and mission control. As developers, we had the opportunity of a lifetime to make every kind of error humanly possible. We evolved software engineering itself accordingly. No onboard flight software errors were ever known to occur during flight. Much of the credit goes not only to those I have learned from, but also to the errors I have had the opportunity of having had some responsibility in their making, without which we would not have been able to learn the things we did.
Our next inductee has had so many political appointments, has held so many industry and professional roles, not including his military tenure, that you might think he helped create stealth technologies just so he could move between meetings without being seen. Paul Kaminsky has served his country with distinction and is here tonight to receive his place as an American whose impact has aided in our national security and saved countless lives. Please welcome Phil Roberts, Paul's classmate and friend, to present Paul Kaminsky for induction into the National Aviation Hall of Fame.
I'm privileged to introduce the Honorable Paul G. Kaminsky.
for recognition as a 2020 Enshrinee in the National Aviation Hall of Fame. Paul's family is very important to him. His wife, Julie, couldn't be here tonight because of medical issues. But his daughter, Laura Reese, that's the last name, sorry, Laura Reese, her husband, Dave, grandchildren, Stephen and Jessica, are here with the daughter-in-law, April Kaminsky. Dr. Sana, Julie's physician right now, and a good family friend is also here at Paul's table. When Paul was very young, to tell you about him, he received a beginner's toolkit. It had a screwdriver and other things and so on, pliers, you know. The screwdriver assisted his early development and experimentation with the removal of all the screws from his grandma's dining room table. So he already was inquisitive and he liked to test things, we know that. Moving ahead to the Air Force Academy, he achieved military and academic recognitions which were accurate indicators for his later successes in lifelong service to our nation. He went to MIT for postgraduate studies right after Academy graduation. In his early military career, he was an initiator of the programs that developed and fielded precision targeting weapons capabilities. Another success that he had was early development of synthetic aperture radar satellites. Paul assisted Dr. Perry with the initiation of the stealth program from 1997 to 1981. He was then selected by USAF Chief General Lou Allen to direct the stealth program until 1984. With the F-117 already fielded then and the B-2 underway, Paul retired from the Air Force and for 10 years worked with Dr. Perry in the high-tech investment banking business. He returned to DoD as the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Technology, and in this capacity, Paul led all DoD research, development, and acquisition with a budget of $100 billion. In that time, that was money. His mission was to improve the design and effectiveness of all weapon systems that were existing, and then into the foreseeable future. Paul has contributed to overall national security by advising other government agencies about technologies and their best applications. Paul's part in ending the Cold War is referred to in a private note from President Reagan, which said, and I quote, "Seldom has a person of your rank, Colonel, achieved so much through the sheer genius of your ideas," unquote. In 2006, President G.W. Bush awarded Paul the National Medal of Technology. Paul serves on many industrial and government boards, including one at the Air Force Academy, right through to today. At the Air Force Academy, he initiated and personally has supported a new way to train our military leaders of the future called the Institute for Future Conflict. It is in operation today. I end with daughter Laura's response when I first talked to her about how to describe Dad. Quote, she said, "Amazing," unquote. I've noted in these few short minutes, from U.S. presidents to classmates, to peers, to friends, and family, he is a very special patriot and an amazing person. I present the Honorable Paul G. Kaminsky for recognition as an NHF Enshrinee Class of 2020.
Tonight, we welcome aerospace innovator Paul Kaminsky to the National Aviation Hall of Fame.
Phil, thank you for that extremely kind introduction. You were so right about the importance of my family. While my daughter, Laura, might have thought I was amazing, let me tell you that my wife, Julie, was more amazing. And I wish she could be here tonight to share this award. An extraordinary wife, she was always there to support me. She also supported the needs of our children, friends, and my professional colleagues at times when I was absent. I also thank Laura and her family for supporting me during the past 7 years, helping to reduce the real gap caused by my wife, Julie's illness. Finally, I thank my cherished classmates, about 8 of whom are here tonight, traveling from around the country. I thank the Air Force Academy Foundation and graduate associations, which are here tonight, and also an exciting new company colleagues like Electric Arrow, who are journeyed here tonight to join me. Now, Phil, I have to say that you weren't entirely correct in attributing to me the many accomplishments that were listed. That credit must be shared by dedicated teams of people, sometimes involving thousands of people, who did the hard work designing, building, testing, and deploying the systems that significantly enhanced our national security. I was blessed to be a member of those teams, and I also attribute the success to visionary leaders and mentors like Secretary of Defense William Perry, who I worked for in at least 4 different capacities through my careers. Because of these leaders, I found myself being moved up in a series of challenging and interesting assignments. I was privileged to work in 3 areas, each of which became what I would describe as the leg of a 3-legged stool that supported something called our Offset 2 strategy. This was a strategy based on using advanced technology in each of these 3 legs to give our armed forces a quality and set of capabilities that were more than sufficient to offset what the Soviet Union had in a much greater quantity, much greater size of forces in comparison to our own. Leg 1 of these 3 legs developed the precision-guided munitions that Phil referred to that could make a direct hit, enabling just 1 weapon for most targets and reducing collateral damage to innocent people. Leg 2 provided advanced radars in air and in space to be able to find the targets that we needed to find, day, night, and with the radar through the clouds. And Leg 3 used stealth aircraft to be able to defeat the Soviet defenses and deliver the munitions while preventing the loss of lives to our pilots. And I would comment as an aside that about 5% of my Air Force Academy classmates were killed in action, badly injured, or taken prisoner of war during the Vietnam War. In contrast, while flying stealth aircraft in combat, we have not lost a single pilot to any enemy air defense system. As you might imagine, as an Air Force Academy graduate, this is one of my primary motivations to do the stealth program and to really make it work. The first demonstration of this Offset 2 strategy capability was in Desert Storm, and the performance awed our potential adversaries, and as a result was a significant contributor to the end of the Cold War. I attribute my contribution here to being a successful leader and engineer, enabled by, following your theme, standing on the shoulders of giants. And so in doing, let me describe, with a bit of humor to this otherwise serious discussion, the 5 stages of a successful career in engineering. And I'll use my own name for emphasis to describe these stages. So stage 1 is, who's Kaminsky? Stage 2 is, well, this is kind of an interesting problem. Let's see what Kaminsky can do with it. Stage 3, which is sort of the pinnacle of the career, is, golly, we have an important program and we got to have Kaminsky to take it on. Unfortunately, that is followed by stage 4, which is, well, what we need is a young Kaminsky. And then, unfortunately, there's a stage 5, which says, who's Kaminsky? And so I wish to conclude my remarks by thanking the National Aviation Hall of Fame for recognizing people like me who might still be able to make a difference, and this recognition enables us to do so even though we might be regarded as being in stage 5. But a lot more important is the incentive that you create for those in the generations that follow to seek to become that young Kaminsky that we need to follow our path. And they will be enabled also by standing on the shoulders of giants. So I thank you all for this recognition. Ask you also to recognize the many who actually made this happen working in the field. Thank you very much.
There are few people in aviation whose outward impact is as prevalent as Joe Clark. Everyone who visits an airport, looks at a plane in the sky, sees the beauty of the blended winglet, knows Joe's legacy. Because of Joe's vision and passion, over 10 billion gallons of fuel have been saved with corresponding emissions reduction. Of course, that is not only Joe's only impact. He had a fantastic career in aviation that spanned decades. And it all started in 1964 when he met Clay Lacy, then he met Bruce McCaw, and these 3 entrepreneurs would buy and sell and set aviation records and make history together. Here to present his friend for induction, National Aviation Hall of Fame enshrinee, Clay Lacy.
Well, thank you. I met my friend Joe Clark in 1965, almost the same time as I met Bruce McCaw, which is sitting over here. Joe and Bruce and I have done many things together. Joe was someone I admired, always truthful at what he thought and said. You depend on what he said, never take advantage of anyone. He never took advantage of anyone. Very close to his sister, Maggie, his brother, mother, and father. Was always ready to help. loved aviation, spent his whole life in it. Got to know almost everyone in it. Responsible for so many European airplanes getting to the U.S. Introducing the L-39. I flew over 2,000 hours with Joe Clark, mostly in jets, but also in like a 3-engine turboprop DC-3, plus lots of other aircraft. Joe loved to fly and was an excellent pilot. Always wanted to learn more, something new. Set several speed records in his G5, just for the fun of it. It was his company, Aviation Partners, that he started, that were responsible for winglets on the Gulfstream and on the Boeing 737. Over 1,300 were put on a Boeing 737, 1,300 sets, plus many other aircraft. Aviation Partners is a very innovative company. While Joe was running around the world looking for new ideas, Judy Galfano, which is here in the audience tonight, sitting here, was his second in charge, secretary and second in charge, kept the company running. Joe was great in choosing people to help and get them to join his programs. Such as Bernie Gardner, a Boeing engineer who did so much to get the wingman program together, and a brilliant guy about airplanes. Joe had the ability to get people into all of his projects, like Bernie and Dale Rands, an ex-Boeing test pilot and one of the greatest. Joe had the ability to form teams that would work together. Thank you, Joe, for being such a good person. We were all lucky to know you. Thank you, National Aviation Hall of Fame, for recognizing Joe's contributions and all that he has done for aviation. I know Joe is not with us tonight. On behalf of the National Aviation Hall of Fame, I'm honored to present this award to Joe Clark. On behalf of Joe, accepting this award is Joe's sister, Maggie.
Tonight, we welcome aviation entrepreneur and innovator Joe Clark to the National Aviation Hall of Fame. Please welcome to the stage Maggie Clark and Chase Englehart, the sister and godson of the late Joe Clark.
For as long as I can remember, Joe always loved anything to do with flying. Some of my fondest memories of Joe was watching him clean parts of his P-51 Mustang in our backyard. Joe has always been a front runner for the aviation industry. From the time he flew in his first Lear in his early 20s, to starting a private business jet in the late 60s, to organizing Friendship Run, raising $500,000 for kids. He started aviation when a friend wanted his Gulfstream II to fly at Hawaii nonstop. Joe gathered retired engineers and went on to change the face of aviation with API's blended winglets. A joint venture with the Boeing company was soon formed, creating further aviation success. I'm honored to accept this award on his behalf. Mom and Dad would have been so proud of Joe. Mom would always refer to him as my flyboy and tell him to reach for the stars. Thank you all for being here tonight and honoring my late brother. Thank you.
Joe didn't just love aviation. It was ingrained in who he was as a person. He always told me it was in the cockpit flying where he was the most calm, at peace. It was his zen. This makes sense because flying forces you to stay in the present, focus on task at hand, and not allow yourself to be distracted by other issues in your day-to-day life. People would ask Joe which airplane he loved to fly the most. His answer was always, whichever I'm flying at the moment. It's not surprising that someone with this much passion for flying and aviation was able to have such a profound impact on the industry with the blended winglet. For me, it was not only a pleasure, but also an honor and privilege to be a part of his life and know him as well as I did. This award is such an honor and an incredible place to be, and it's amazing to hear all the stories. And I just can't think of a more deserving person than Joe Clark, and I'm very humbled to accept this on his behalf.
To most in this room, Ed Boland needs no introduction. As the passionate president and CEO of the National Business Aviation Association, NBAA, Ed works tirelessly to ensure sound policy and smooth skies for his membership. To make such a significant impact, Ed must work closely with NBAA's constituents to ensure their needs are addressed, and because of that, when he and Joan Sullivan Garrett met, they were fast friends. Having a similar vision for business aviation and mutual respect for family united these two who have been supporters of one another for years. Please welcome Ed Boland to the stage.
Well, thank you, Pete. Good evening, everybody. You know, Joan Sullivan Garrett began her professional career as a registered nurse, and then she became a flight nurse. Like most people who go into nursing, Jo did so in order to help people. She wanted to provide them comfort and healing. She wanted to save lives. Tonight, we have an opportunity to celebrate Joan with one of the highest honors our industry and our nation has to offer. We're doing so because Joan has indeed saved lives on an almost unimaginable scale. Tragic circumstances inspired Joan to found MedAir in 1985. And as a result of that, this company, with its kits and its remote ability to provide medical services, that company has become one of the world's largest providers of travel safety. It has reached all the way around the world. It counts as its clients over 200 of the world's leading airlines and thousands of business aviation operators. So tonight, as we celebrate Joan, we do so because she has quite literally made the world a safer place. Joan, in addition to all you have done to promote safety, you've also given back to aviation in innumerable ways. Your leadership on the Flight Safety Foundation, your commitment to the International Women in Aviation, and of course your profound leadership at NBAA has helped us build an industry that is inspiring people for the future. So it is entirely appropriate tonight, as we talk about standing on the shoulders of giants, that we recognize a giant among us and welcome Joan into the pantheon of heroes known as the National Aviation Hall of Fame. But Joan, before I ask you to come up here and accept the enshrinement, I first want to ask someone else to come to the stage, and that's Joan's granddaughter, Hadley. And I'm going to ask Hadley to come forward with her mother, Sarah. Now, Hadley, I understand you've written a little bit of a report about your grandmother.
Yes,
And tonight, we'd like you to read that for us.
I'd love to. Thank you. Joan Sullivan Garrett, my Nana, founder of Med-Air. Joan Sullivan Garrett started as a flight nurse and was the chief medical officer on helicopters. She saw a need and created a company called Med-Air to fill it. The medical kits on airplanes were from 1924 and didn't have the right supplies in them. She knew she could make a better one, and she did. She added medication for heart attacks, allergy attacks, equipment to take a person's blood pressure, and so much more. She started making better medical kits for airplanes, created training programs for flight attendants and pilots, and created a center called MedLink, where people on the planes could talk to emergency room doctors on the ground. She even went to Washington, D.C., where she helped convince Congress that all airplanes needed to have defibrillators, the things that shock your heart. Now, the whole world depends on these life-saving tools to keep people safe. So the next time you're on an airplane and someone has a medical emergency, remember the difference Joan Sullivan Garrett made.
Tonight, we welcome aviation medical visionary Joan Sullivan Garrett into the National Aviation Hall of Fame.
Thank you, Ed, for that amazing introduction. And thank you, Hadley. So amazing. I told someone last night that when I first started this company, I struggled to get that 30-second elevator speech. And when I heard her, with her project, do that in her class, and I said, where was she? I needed her. So thank you, Ed, for that great introduction. And first, I'd like to say how honored I am to be amid such great aviation heroes. And you pioneers, what an honor. And congratulations to the class of 2020 and 2022. Amy, you and your staff have pulled off an amazing feat. She really does deserve a hand. Thank you for this incredible event and in this incredible venue. And I have never attended one of these ceremonies where she actually hired a bird to fly it around. I am humbled and grateful for the recognition of my life's work. Thank you, Michael Coelho, and the entire Board of Trustees for honoring me with this great privilege. My family, whom you just met one of, two of, they're all here tonight, You mean the world to me. Thank you for being here. And I have such very dear friends. Friends that help me in the garden, help me drink my whiskey, and they're here as well. And I have two very special guests with me tonight that I want to recognize. Ambassador Barbara Barrett, 25th Secretary of the Air Force and the first Secretary of the Space Force. Barbara. And her husband, Dr. Craig Barrett, retired CEO and Chairman of the Board, Intel Corporation. Thank you so much for being here tonight. MedAir, now an international SOS company, has touched millions of lives around the world and saved thousands. And collectively, between MedAir and International SOS, we have saved millions of lives because they started their company in 1985, the same as I did. I am proud of how impactful and innovative the company continues to be. Our leadership and passionate associates, many of whom are here tonight, and many from the very beginning, they deserve the recognition. Thank you, Bill Nolney, for your leadership, and thank you to the team. I feel my life's work is not finished, but rather just beginning. Our collective challenge to all of us is to ensure the next generation knows how important the world of aviation is to our future. The opportunities are boundless, and we are proof that one individual can make an enormous difference if we follow our desires and our dreams. But don't mistake, dreams do not come true. They are made true. Yes, it's hard work, but no risk, no reward. There were many times when I started this company that I thought I'd rather be in that helicopter doing what I loved, taking care of my patients. And I was afraid that jumping off that cliff into the world of business, I might fail. But what I learned is if you're not in it, you can't win it. And fear of failure cannot be your obstacle. And this is my message to the youth. But Dennis Waitley said it best. Failure should not be our teacher. It should be our teacher, not our undertaker. Failure is delay, not defeat. It is a temporary detour, not a dead end. Failure is something we can avoid only by saying nothing, doing nothing, and being nothing. Our job now is to encourage the youth to pursue their dreams, to follow their passion by inspiring them to be the future leaders in our great industry. Only in America can someone like me, with a very humble beginning, with an idea and a vision, make it a reality. God bless America and our freedom to innovate, pioneer, invent, and make a difference. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the son of 1979 National Aviation Hall of Fame enshrinee Neil Armstrong, Mr. Mark Armstrong, who will be reciting John Gillespie McGee Jr.'s High Flight.
Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter's silvered wings. Sunward I've climbed and joined the tumbling mirth of sun-split clouds and done 100 things you have not dreamed of. Wheeled and soared and swung high in the sunlit silence. Hovering there, I've chased the shouting winds along and flung my eager craft through footless, halls of air. Up the long, delirious, burning blue, I've topped the windswept heights with easy grace, where never lark or even eagle flew. And while with silent, lifting mind I've trod the high, untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touched the face of God.
Thank you. Once again, I invite you all to join me in one final congratulations of the National Aviation Hall of Fame enshrinement classes of 2020 and 2022. When I call your name, please stand to be recognized. The late Willa Brown, represented by David Brown. The late Geraldine Mock, represented by Susan Reed. The late Eugene J. Bullard, represented by Richard Reed. The late Max A. Faget, represented by Anne Faget. The late Richard F. Gordon, represented by Larry Gordon. Story Musgrave, Margaret Hamilton, Paul G. Kaminsky, the late Joe Clark, represented by Maggie Clark, and Joan Sullivan Garrett.
Please turn your attention to our podium for one last time tonight for a special announcement.
Good evening. My name is Tom Lodge, and I'm the Board of Nominations Chair for the National Aviation Hall of Fame. I am proud to announce the names of remarkable aerospace legends who have been selected for enshrinement next year as the class of 2023. These 6 individuals were selected through the diligent efforts of the Board of Nominations. Beginning with Aviation and WASP, Delta Ben. Pioneer pilot and educator, Cornelius Coffey. Astronaut and fighter pilot, Fred Hayes. Global airport visionary, Angela Gittins. Entrepreneur and technologist, Elon Musk. And aviation policy groundbreaker, Ed Stimpson. Please join us at their induction next fall in our nation's capital in Washington, D.C. Thank you, good night, thank you for coming, and please drive home safely.